Hey, thanks for tuning in for another great conversation here on Strong Leader Development Podcast. If you found value in today's episode, you can catch every episode on your favorite platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. So we'd look forward to you tuning in and on those platforms. Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining me today on this webinar about who I am as a leader and the importance of living authentically as a ministry or a pastor or ministry leader, minister, pastor, all of those roles in church or nonprofit ministries. And I want to honor you. I want to honor you for stepping into this. It's difficult to be a pastor, a minister. You had this calling. You wanted to spread the gospel. You wanted to disciple and build up Christians all across your realm, and you put your heart and your life into this. And so I want to honor you for that. Most pastors did not enter into ministry thinking about, I'm going to be a leader. They entered the ministry because they were called. And there's a gap. Somewhere along the way, every pastor discovers something that is unexpected. See, seminary trains you, Bible college trains you to study scripture, to be able to relay that in maybe a prophetic way, or to put it into programs and utilize it across your church or your ministry. It teaches theology, it teaches hermeneutics, it teaches church history, it teaches preaching. But very quickly, pastors and ministry leaders also discover that it requires something else: leadership. And there is a tension between being pastoral and shepherding and guiding and teaching and leading. So suddenly you're thrust into your role and you are leading people. You're managing conflict, you're casting vision, you're guiding staff, you're building a culture and making decisions that affect a few lives to hundreds of lives. And in a lot of cases, and in most seminaries and Bible colleges, as you're preparing scripturally for the role, you might not have gotten much training on leadership. So what do? Well, most pastors do one of three or four things. One, they imitate another pastor or another leader or another ministry leader. They, number two, may read books or try frameworks or go to seminars to learn, or they simply survive from week to week. And really, last, they just knuckle down and just drive through it and figure it out along the way. So before leadership skills matter, there's actually a deeper question beyond the skills that you must answer. And that is, who am I as a leader? You know, these days, when I do any kind of leadership training or guidance, this is the first thing that I want to cover with any leaders that I'm guiding. We have to understand the fact that we have to know who we are as a leader before we really step into it. Too many leaders out there, both in church or in ministries and in business, will lead from a place that they're really not themselves. They are diving into the skills, they're diving into the strategies, they are mimicking and looking at others, and they don't really know who they are as a leader and it makes it much more difficult. Leadership is difficult enough without having to strive at it. But when we are leading from an inauthentic place, it is even more difficult. It doesn't begin with strategies. It begins with identity. So here's the danger. When identity is unclear, leadership actually becomes performance. You ever feel like this? You ever feel the pressure to preach like someone else, build a church like someone else, lead like someone else? That it happens, and it's pretty normal in this Western culture and our leadership. And there's a lot of good material out there on skills and strategy, but not much on who am I. I like to use David as a huge example for me. When David went to fight Goliath, he came and said, I will do it. I will step up. I will fight this giant. He is defying the Lord. And Saul put his armor on David. And here's the thing. David walked around and he said, I can't fight in this. Took it all off and went to who he was and what he knew. And he grabbed the sling, he grabbed the stones, and we know the end of the story. He defeated the giant with his own self. I mean, God's power, which we all have in us, but he did it authentically as David, not as somebody else. How many of us would put on that armor and try to go and fight in somebody else's armor, thinking this is what I'm supposed to do? But he already knew. He already knew who he was. So when you live in your identity as a leader, you move much more freely. Right? In that armor, you can function, but you're not moving as freely. Authentic pastoral ministry leadership emerges when you lead as the leader God actually made, not the pastor or ministry leader you think people expect. So a ministry leader or pastor who knows his or her identity leads with authority and does not lead from fear. Fear is a big key of us putting on different armors to try to lead from. So here's a burden of borrowed leadership. I'll give an example of myself, and this was when I was an athletic coach. When I first started coaching girls softball, I had been a coach a while. I'd been coaching boys basketball, but I had not coached girls softball before. I'd done diamond sports. I understood the game to some degree. But one, I had not coached girls. And two, I had not coached this particular diamond sport. I had a mentor who had been coaching for years. He's the one who helped us develop the program and start the program. So I learned a lot from him in the first 2 or 3 years, but I also sounded a lot like him. And when he was not at practice, when he wasn't able to be there, I was just repeating what he said. And it felt like I was pushing string when it came to coaching those girls. I had to learn what is my style of coaching and who am I as a coach? What's my vision for this team? He is giving me great material, but how do I get it across? And I had to learn, how do I get the most out of people? And at that point, when I hit that point, we became quite successful. And eventually that coach went on to coach somewhere else, and I had the team. And I was already in place, already had my way of doing it because it was coming directly from me. He taught me a lot, and I used a lot of his strategies and skills, but I was doing it as myself. And I bet most of you, not all, but most of you in your pastoral ministries and whatever ministry that you lead, You may often feel like you might be pretending or you're carrying somebody else's words. And you might get that from conference speakers or large church pastors or ministry influencers or a mentor that you had. And you want to replicate what you see because it looks like it will work. But here's the problem: God didn't call you to replicate another pastor's ministry, He called you to be you. I read a book, Living Fearless, by Jamie Winship, and it really drove this home for me. And he had this beautiful picture of identity. And that is, it is not something you create, it is something you receive. It is given by God. You are a unique person who has unique characteristics. And that's the reason you got into being a pastor or a minister, or one of the reasons at least. And what does that mean? Your identity is not your church size, it's not your preaching style, it's not your reputation, your ministry success. And we get that fostered in our Western culture. Oftentimes, when you're having a conversation with somebody new, one of the questions we ask to get to know somebody is, "What do you do?" And we identify as, "I'm in ministry, I'm a pastor." And we begin to take on this persona, so to speak, of what that looks like. You already know when you say what you do, you see the person shift to some degree in order to try to relate with you. And we take that on as an identity rather than receiving our identity from God and say, my profession and how I use myself is in ministry or as a pastor. So leadership flows from that identity, not towards it. Your pastoral ministry does not develop your identity. You have your identity. So how do I use God's given gift to me in my pastoral ministry? That's what I'm looking for. So, what are some ways we need to step into this? One, we need to pursue leadership intentionally. I encourage all of you to look at ways to grow in leadership. What does it look like for me to grow in leadership? And even though it begins with identity, you still must pursue leadership intentionally. You've got to make efforts to move towards what does it look like for me to put me into it. So there are 4 ways to grow when it comes to uh, diving into leadership intentionally. Right? 1, we do learn by observation. We're going to watch how other leaders do things, and we can say, that fits me, this doesn't fit me. You don't have to blueprint exactly the leaders you're following. Read and watch and pay attention to how they work with people, how they lead up front, how they teach, how they set up their programs. How do they respond to conflict? How do they treat others? How do they handle pressure? And then you use your discernment to say, I can use some of these skills because those fit me, but some of those, that would not work in my environment. And that's the first thing, is through observation, looking at that to lead intentionally. Second is read widely, right? In other words, don't just read books for your sermons or theologians and all of that. That's good stuff, very good stuff, very important that you have a strong theology and you stand in it. That's a part of who you are. But it's also good to read books on leadership. It's good to read books on history, good to read books on psychology, culture, biography, even stories, because they are relatable to biblical stories. You can pull things in that also expands you. and allows you to have a wide variety of experiences and folders in your brain to pull from as they relate to you. So your inner world becomes broader and your leadership will become deeper the more that you read. I say this often about reading. I learned this from a friend of mine who said, you don't have to finish every book. As long as you land on something that you were looking for or that really helped you and you are really finished, set the book aside. You got what you needed. So when I'm saying read, you may not have to read whole books sometimes. Sometimes you should, but you don't always have to do that. You can also go auditory if that's the way it works for you. I know for me, I read so many emails a day, and I'm sure many of you in ministry do too, that sometimes it's hard to read outside, especially if you are reading to prepare for a sermon series or for something that you're guiding. It's hard to read beyond that. But I encourage you to put it into audio or even follow podcasts that go alongside of a book that you want to read or want to pull from. So that's number two, read widely. Third, ask for opportunity. If you're not the lead pastor, look for ways to step into your leadership. Look for opportunities and ask for opportunities. A lot of times I've seen um, ministry leaders and pastors hesitate to step forward for a couple of reasons. One, they're already inundated with so much work, and you don't want to be volunteered or added to something else. Or two, you're not quite sure that you are the leader you think you are, and so you will hesitate. But what happens is we kind of wait to be asked, and then we don't get asked, and then all of a sudden we have a little bit of resentment. So you want to avoid that. You want to step in with initiative. And God opens doors sometimes when we just simply say, I'm willing. So take initiative, ask for opportunity. That's number three. Number four, you want to practice. You want to put yourself in positions where you are practicing and making mistakes and doing it well. Um, you want to be making mistakes. You want to make decisions. You want to have some responsibility. Jesus said, wisdom is not merely hearing the truth, it's applying it. And you want to put leadership into practice. When a senior leader or a senior pastor or a ministry leader of some sort gives you an assignment, do it well. Practice your leadership wherever you can. Now, I want to talk a little bit about a big trap around identity. And, and this really resonates with pastors and ministry leaders. I know because I've been in ministry. I haven't been in church per se, but I've been in ministry all my life, parachurch type ministries, where I really dive in because I believe in what I'm doing. And what happens is we can confuse our role with our identity. I know for me, I was in a Christian school for 30 years, and that identity was very hard to set aside because I had believed the role was me, and I was living out of persona. So, and then I moved into another ministry, and here I am again diving into a good thing because I believe in it. And it's hard for me to separate me from it instead of understanding who I am as a leader and then stepping back into my role and using that skill. So over time, pastors, ministry leaders begin to think I am this. And that's not it. You serve as pastor, ministry leader, and your identity is much deeper. You are a son or daughter of God. You are a follower of Christ, and you are a shepherd entrusted with people. And you are all the good character traits that God put in you. That's who you should be when you're at your church, when you were at home, when you are on the road somewhere. This should be the same person everywhere. And you want now. Here's the thing: you may have different responses in those three places, but those responses still should come from the core of who you are. Here's what happens when the role becomes an identity, when the role becomes persona. Somebody criticizes you or criticizes what decision you've made, and it becomes personal. Feels like rejection, feels like a failure. And you find yourself being defensive because you believe in what you're doing, but you've also poured so much of you into it, it makes you defensive. And a defensive pastor or ministry leader is actually hard to work with. And there's not much leading going on in that case. And really, it is one of the steps towards burnout because you have really taken on this as you, and it's not you. It's a role that you play using your God given gifts to do the role. Those are the dangers that happen when we take on the role as our identity. It becomes persona. But understanding my identity restores my clarity. It helps me. If I understand who I am stepping into this and know that I am not my role, I am the man or woman God made me to be, serving in this role, then the distinction becomes clear. Feedback becomes easier, pressure becomes lighter, leadership is more freeing. You live in freedom as a leader. It allows you to cross those boundaries and not have to worry about being defensive. So, what do I do next? Once I recognize that I'm out of the identity of the role and I am this and I play this role, not fake, because it's still important. What do I do next? Well, one, we want to live in that initiative. I talked about it earlier, but you want to step in to addressing issues early. You want to be a starter of conversations. You need to make decisions. Rely on others to help you, but you are the one that is decisive and says, this is the answer. This is the direction we're going. Leadership rarely moves forward through passivity. So you want to be one who takes initiative in your role. Second, you want to live in integrity. Integrity is not always being good. Integrity is not always honesty. Integrity is not always truth. Those are all factors within integrity. Integrity is alignment. I am in this space as who I am, and I'm going to be who I am. I'm going to line up. My inside matches my outside. Also, integrity is I'm keeping my word. If I agree to be somewhere, I'm going to be somewhere. If I agree to a commitment of something, I'm going to keep the commitment. Now, sometimes things get in the way of those, and we have to renegotiate those commitments and those agreements. But be clear. Don't just show up and ask forgiveness. Be clear about, hey, I overcommitted here. Can I renegotiate when, or can I ask someone else to take this? Be clear about the communication around it. And so you want your inside to match your outside. You also want to be one who keeps their word. And I will say, honestly, I've dealt with a lot of pastors and ministry leaders. Time is an agreement that we don't keep very well. And it's rooted in good choices. We are usually late to meetings because we are being pastoral with somebody else from another meeting. But there is a happy medium of, hey, I want you to know that I'm glad to be spending time with you, but I need to land this plane so I can go to my next meeting or I'm going to be late, and out of integrity with this next group. Or this one's going to run long, communicate with the next group. I'm running late because I'm choosing to stay with this one until I'm finished. That if you'll just communicate better, that will help you alleviate that stress of keeping time, because it's very difficult to do in the relational world as our pastor's heart comes online. It doesn't have to change who you are. Your pastoral ministry heart should still come out, but you can put time limits because it breaks your integrity when you don't. And then don't apologize when you fail, just own it. You know what? I did not keep the time. I made a choice to stay here with this a little bit longer. I hope I have not damaged our relationship because of it. Right? And hold to that. No apologies. Apologies, people have heard them before, and they're tired of hearing apologies. Own it. Just stand in your integrity. It helps build your authority, it helps build your influence, and it helps build trust. So, finally, as you move into the leader you are called to be, you want to do three things. You want to possess your leadership, you want to model, and you want to empower. Okay? So what do I mean by possessing it? Own it. Right? Own your leadership. Are they expecting me to be a leader? Yes. Okay, I'm going to own this. Get help if you need to. Get coaching if you need to. We're willing to walk alongside you ourselves. Right? You can check in with me, and I'd love to walk alongside you to help you to own your leadership. Know it and own it and live your leadership. Second, model it. Model it well. How can I show people what leadership looks like, what good leadership looks like? It might be through some vulnerability. It might be through some authority. It's through your integrity and keeping your agreements. It might be in decision making and choices. It might be in your knowledge of what biblical passage would fit this scenario right here. Right? Any of that can model leadership to others. And then finally, which is a big one, and it's hard for pastors to do, that is to empower. It's to empower others around you. Look at people's strengths, especially strengths you might not have, and empower them to step in and take some of this load. There are all kinds of volunteers in our ministries and churches who are interested in helping out. I know we get burned by some when we try to give them something or they don't get our concept. And that's a whole nother webinar of learning how do I get out of my head to others so I can empower them. But for the most part, you do have volunteers around you who are willing to step in. And you don't want to overburden them, but you can give things to them. Let them make mistakes and then just guide them. Mistakes can still be made up for with good communication. And what it does is it takes a burden off of you. It also moves you away from pretending of being something you're not when it's just not your strength. And it creates healthy teams by empowering them and have them report back to you. Maybe have many conversations around what they're carrying, but empower them to do that for you. And it'll help your ministry so much. So it's really important to understand, who am I? Who am I as a leader? If we don't get to that space, all of the things I gave you in between are still going to be hard to, to navigate and your leadership as a pastor and a ministry leader. Every leadership principle flows from identity. It's from service, it's courage, integrity, initiative, humility, all of that's within you. And so your question today, and to begin to step into, is who am I? Where have I been pretending, not intentionally, but out of necessity? Where have I been mimicking other leaders rather than modeling after other leaders? And how do I step into this as me? Right? And so, again, once I moved into that role of the coach that I became, it catapulted my leadership, not only as a coach in that team, but in my life. I began to notice, wow, I have mimicked so many people around leadership. And once I learned that I have certain personality traits, I have a certain way of doing it, and I can stretch and grow into some other areas, this is really who I am. It made my leadership so much easier to do, right? Learning to lead like Jesus as he authentically did, and also understanding what Solomon talked about in Ecclesiastes, how the burden of leadership is difficult. The more you become who you are supposed to be, not striving to be someone else, and surrendering to be the person God made you to be, then you become the leader you've been looking for. And it just allows people will respond to you. They will respond to you in a different way when you are authentic with your leadership. So, who am I truly today, God? That is the question that you need to be asking. Identify who you are. Take your activity out into the world next, because you can't lead others well until you know the person who you're bringing into the room. So, who are you as the pastor leader, right? So, there was a comment that came in through LinkedIn, and I wanted to say something about that. It was this: a great point. David didn't wear Saul's armor, and it gave him freedom to be himself. And we need to learn from our own unique identity and gifting. Thank you so much for that. Right? That is so true. I have watched it over and over. And David is just one example. But you look at several leaders along the way. I think Moses had a burden of leadership that he was trying to take on too much. And Jethro, a good mentor, told him, hey, you're going to wear yourself out. Right? So you're always looking for who is it that I am, rather than what can I pick up and carry and try to be as a leader and a pastor and a ministry leader. Thank you so much for joining today. Be sure and reach out to me if you need something. We've got all kinds of resources to be able to help you, especially one-to-one resource. I'd love to do that, or groups that we have. But yeah, set up a time to call with me. There should be a number there for you to be able to set up, or a calendar link, and would love to visit with you more around your leadership and to help you grow. Thanks for being with us today. Are you curious about how strong leader development can support your growth? Book a free discovery session with me, and I'll walk you through what it looks like and how I can help you in whatever fashion you need. I like to listen and hear what you have and design whatever works best for you. So reach out and book that free session